There's a moment every man dreads, a subtle change, a small delay in her text, a glance that feels distant. The warmth that once radiated from her eyes begins to flicker. She's pulling away, and your instincts? They scream for you to chase, to explain, to ask what's wrong, to fix it. But that exact impulse, that frantic emotional scramble, is what kills desire. Because the second you chase, you're no longer the force she's drawn to. You've become the child begging for love instead of the man she silently tests for power. This is the romantic battlefield, and your reaction in this split second decides whether you rise as the dominant force in her psyche or collapse into the pile of men she no longer respects. The core pain we're dealing with here is abandonment. Not just the fear of being alone, but the ego death that comes when a woman withdraws her attention. It feels like rejection, like failure, like punishment for being vulnerable. But that pain is a trap, a test, and buried inside it is a singular, devastating truth. Women don't pull away because they've decided rationally that you're not good enough. They pull away to provoke a reaction, a test, a probe into your psychological spine. They want to feel your depth of power without asking. They want to sense, without words, whether you're the type of man who will shatter or stand. So here is the singular thesis that governs this entire seduction dynamic. When a woman pulls away, she is subconsciously testing your frame to locate your psychological center of gravity. The man who responds with emotional gravity, who does not chase, collapse, or explain triggers her most ancient attraction reflex. Because in that stillness, in that refusal to flinch, he radiates control. And control is the oxygen of feminine desire. The promise, then, is simple. If you understand the psychology behind her withdrawal and respond with the precise move that radiates dominance instead of desperation, her retreat transforms into pursuit. She becomes addicted to your silence, obsessed with your unavailability, haunted by your power. Let's enter the first scenario. You've been seeing each other for several weeks. The energy was intense, the chemistry palpable. She texted first, initiated calls, laughed hard, touched often, and then she pulls back. Fewer emojis, slower replies, subtle distancing. She says she's busy, that work is stressful, that she needs space. The weak man panics. He senses the shift, and his ego screams to correct it. He sends a long message asking if she's okay. He offers to help. He suggests dates, reaffirms his feelings, tells her she's amazing. He thinks he's expressing care, but all she sees is desperation dressed in kindness. The hidden test in her pullback was never about whether he cares. It was a demand to feel his weight. His lack of emotional urgency tells her nothing. His rush to validate tells her everything. It says, "You're the prize. I'm the beggar." It says, "Your attention dictates my stability." In her ancient biological mind, this is a disaster. Because the man who loses control at the slightest withdrawal is the man she can never fully surrender to. He's not safe. He's not sovereign. He's soft. Now, contrast this with the man who passes the test. She pulls away, and he responds with calm distance. No chasing, no questions. He mirrors the space. He occupies his time. He posts with subtle purpose, never attention-seeking, always indifferent. He lets the silence breathe. Why is this powerful? Because it subcommunicates abundance. It signals that her attention is welcomed, not needed. It reframes the dynamic. She now feels she's losing value, not him. This is psychological dominance. She expected protest. She got stillness. She hoped to test his insecurity. She found his immovability. Her mind can't help but shift. At first, it's confusion. Why isn't he reacting? Does he even care? She scrolls through his recent stories, searching for clues. He seems unfazed, not angry, not bitter, just sovereign. Now comes the intrigue. She replays memories of their moments together, trying to decode what he's thinking. Her withdrawal, meant to draw him in, is now causing her to spiral into obsession. The balance of power is reversed, not through aggression, but through pure emotional gravity. In her subconscious mind, he's no longer just attractive, he's dangerous. He has something no other man has, inner stillness under feminine pressure. Let's expand into scenario 2. They're in a situationship. It's undefined, fluid. She likes the idea of keeping her options open. So one day, casually, she mentions that she's not really looking for anything serious right now. The words hang in the air like a dagger wrapped in silk. She wants to see what he does with it. This is the hidden test. She's not stating a fact. She's issuing a challenge. The deeper psychology here? She wants to feel if he will beg for exclusivity or collapse into passive agreement. Evolution wired her to search for strength, and strength means indifference to outcome. It means desire without attachment. If he flinches, if he tries to convince her otherwise, she'll know he needs her. And a man who needs her can never fully lead her. The weak man hears her statement and panics. He smiles and says, "Yeah, of course, I totally get that." But then, within hours, he floods her with attention. Sends playlists, good morning texts, buys her things. He wants to prove he's worthy of her choosing him, but she wasn't looking for proof. She was scanning for backbone. She wanted to feel whether he had the strength to walk away. And now she knows he doesn't. Every act of pursuit, no matter how sweet or thoughtful, now screams of insecurity. He isn't leading the dance. He's clinging to it. In her subconscious, his value plummets. She labels him sweet but weak. And from that moment, her attraction dies a quiet death. But the powerful man? He doesn't react at all. When she says she's not looking for anything serious, he offers a half smile and says, "Good, neither am I." Then he changes the subject. He keeps his tone light, his body language relaxed. There's no trace of offense, no sarcasm, no need to one-up her. He simply mirrors her disinterest with elegant detachment. And then he subtly pulls back. He doesn't text first the next day. He's slower to respond. He makes himself scarce. Why? Because he's signaling what she truly fears, that she's not the only one with options. And deeper than that, he's signaling that his time and attention are gifts, not guarantees. He flips the script. Suddenly, she's no longer in control of the dynamic. She feels it slipping, and panic sets in. She starts to text more. She tries harder. She tests again this time, not from power, but from desperation. What's happening inside her? A complete shift in perception. The man who once seemed calm now appears mysterious. She replays his nonchalance in her mind, wondering if he ever cared. This lack of emotional need hooks her deeper than any declaration of love ever could. Why? Because women do not fall for words. They fall for tension. They fall for the emotional contrast between closeness and uncertainty. And the man who can create that tension without force, without malice, becomes a psychological drug. Now, it is she who wakes up checking her phone. It is she who wonders where she stands. And that reversal is the ignition of true obsession. Let's move into scenario 3. They've just had an intense night together. The kind of night where she opens up emotionally, lets her guard down, even hints at things she hasn't shared with anyone else. And the next day, she ghosts. No reply. Hours pass. Then a full day. Then, too, silence. For most men, this is maddening. It feels like betrayal. After all, they shared something meaningful, didn't they? But here's the brutal truth. This silence isn't random. It's a calibrated test. After vulnerability, women often retreat not because they've lost interest, but because they need to feel the aftermath of their openness. Will he smother her now? Will he chase? Will he inflate what happened into something she didn't agree to? Her silence is the probe. The deeper test, is he emotionally volatile, or does he possess the stillness of a king? The weak man collapses into anxious overreaction. He sends multiple texts. Hey, did I do something wrong? I thought we had a connection. Can we talk? In his mind, he's showing care, sensitivity. But to her, he's revealed his emotional neediness. The moment she gave him a taste of intimacy, he became addicted. That's not attractive. That's dangerous. Because in her subconscious world, a man who becomes unstable after sex is a man who lacks inner gravity. And if she chooses him, he will require emotional management. She'll have to regulate his moods. She'll become his emotional caretaker. That is the ultimate repulsion. Evolution never designed her to desire the child she must soothe. Attraction dies. Respect dies. And all it took was 3 text bubbles filled with insecurity. Now, the powerful response? It's surgical. She goes silent, and he lets it be. Not because he doesn't care, but because he knows the dance. He knows the rhythm of feminine pullback. He goes about his life. He doesn't check in. He doesn't follow up. In fact, he becomes slightly more elusive. Posts a story at a rooftop bar, laughing with friends. Not posed, not needy, just living. This move is deadly. Because it doesn't scream, I don't care. It whispers, I'm already full. And that whisper infects her. She sees his calm in the aftermath of intimacy and feels a confusing storm inside. Did he not feel what I felt? Was it just sex to him? Why isn't he chasing me like other guys do? She expected tension. Instead, she's met with composure. She expected validation. She's given silence, and that silence breeds hunger. She starts rationalizing reasons to message him. Just wanted to say, I had a good time. Hope your week's going well. These aren't greetings. They're emotional breadcrumbs, her way of trying to reattach. Because now, she's the one needing answers. And in that reversal, she starts to invest. Inside her mind, the image of him is mutating. He's no longer the sweet guy from last night. He's a mystery. A man who can receive deep intimacy and remain centered. That's rare. That's dangerous. That's addictive. She replays the conversation in her head. She reanalyzes every detail. The way he looked at her. The way he touched her. Was he pretending? Or is he just that emotionally solid? This obsession doesn't come from logic. It comes from the space he created by not trying to fill the silence. Because true power in her mind is presence without pursuit. And now, his presence is branded into her thoughts, not because he chased her, but because he didn't have to. Scenario 4 begins in a more emotionally charged territory, an argument. It's the kind of disagreement that doesn't erupt into screaming, but it's sharp. She accuses him of something small, maybe not listening, maybe being distant, maybe not making her feel prioritized. But the deeper truth behind her words isn't about logistics. It's emotional voltage. What she's really saying is, I'm testing your emotional spine. Can you handle my chaos without crumbling? Can you remain a mountain while I become a storm? Now this moment is critical, because most men confuse emotional storms with genuine relationship issues. They enter fix-it mode. They apologize. They explain. They over-validate. Not because they're wrong, but because they fear losing her. This is the collapse. The weak man in this scenario becomes defensive or compliant. He says things like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you, or I'll do better, just tell me what you need. To him, it's maturity, it's love, but to her, it's weakness, because she was never asking for an apology. She was probing for dominance. She wanted to feel the edge. His compliance deflates her. It confirms her fear. He's emotionally soft. He can be manipulated. His identity depends on her approval. And once that realization hits, she starts losing respect on a subconscious level. He may still be sweet, but sweetness without edge becomes syrup nauseating. But the man who passes this test does something radically different. She accuses him, challenges him. Her tone sharpens. Her eyes flare. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't rush to fix. He pauses. He looks at her calm, measured, unshaken, and says, "You're allowed to feel what you feel. I know who I am." Then he disengages, walks into the next room, lets the silence throb. This move is lethal, not because it's cruel, but because it demonstrates something primal. He does not fear her emotional weather. He doesn't need to convince her of anything. His value is not up for negotiation. In that instant, she feels what most men never let her feel: containment. He contains her chaos. He doesn't absorb it. He doesn't react to it. He lets it burn, knowing it will die out on its own. That's the masculine frame, and it's rare. So rare that when a woman feels it, she doesn't just calm down, she melts. Because finally, she feels safe. The psychological shift that occurs in her is monumental. She went into the argument expecting emotional superiority. She assumed he'd fumble, either by pleading or posturing. But instead, she finds herself staring into the eyes of a man who is unmoved, and that stillness seduces her. It reawakens her feminine polarity. It reminds her of what power actually looks like. Not volume, not control, but grounded certainty. She starts doubting herself, not out of shame, but out of reverence. Did I overreact? Why didn't he try to fix it? Why does he feel even more distant now? These questions swirl in her head, each one tightening the rope of attraction. Now she's the one closing the distance. She comes to him later, softer, more feminine. "I'm sorry for what I said. I was just overwhelmed. Can we talk?" This is not weakness. This is surrender. And she only surrenders to the man who doesn't force her to. Because surrender isn't about control, it's about safety. And when he demonstrated that her storm couldn't shake him, she saw what she had been unconsciously craving: a man she can fall into without drowning. That's when obsession begins, not over his looks, not over his words, but over the experience of her own vulnerability in his presence. Now for scenario 5, the most deceptive of all. You've been in a long-term relationship. The connection is deep, the routines are set, and everything seems fine until it isn't. She begins to emotionally withdraw, not overtly. She still smiles, still kisses you, but something's missing. Fewer compliments. Less eye contact, less sexual tension. She initiates less. You feel her slipping, not physically, but emotionally. And the worst part? You can't explain why. That's because this final form of pulling away isn't about momentary tension. It's existential. She's no longer testing your reactions. She's testing your essence. At this stage, the hidden test is brutal. Have you grown passive in the comfort of her presence? Have you allowed her to become your emotional center, replacing your mission? Evolution has designed women to scan for complacency in long-term mates. They want to feel that your edge, your fire, your ambition are not dependent on them. She's pulling away because she senses you've become too emotionally fused. She doesn't want to leave. She wants to feel you reawaken, but the weak man doesn't see this. He senses the change and scrambles. He doubles down on affection, more gifts, more compliments, more check-ins. He tries to initiate intimacy to recreate the passion. But it's hollow, because his energy isn't rooted in power. It's reactionary. It comes from fear. He's trying to buy back her desire with behavior, not presence. And every gesture, no matter how loving, reeks of insecurity. She sees the performance. She smells the panic. And in her mind, the death knell sounds. He's lost himself. The powerful man, however, feels her withdrawal and doesn't rush in to rescue. He doesn't overcorrect. He pulls inward. But not to punish. He pivots. He returns to his purpose. He starts waking up earlier. He sets new goals. He sharpens his body, his work, his habits. He doesn't explain this shift. He just becomes, and she notices. Subtly at first, he's not as emotionally available. He's more focused, less reactive. He's not pulling away, but he's no longer orbiting her. This creates an emotional earthquake. She begins to question everything. Where is his attention going? Is he falling out of love? Did I do something wrong? But underneath that fear is something far more intoxicating. Desire. She feels the polarity return, because now he's not just her partner. He's again become a force one she has to earn. The psychology here is ancient. Women do not fall for the man who sacrifices everything for them. They fall for the man who can love them deeply without ever collapsing his identity into theirs. This man becomes a mirror to her deepest yearning, to feel both chosen and challenged, loved but not owned, claimed but never coddled. His power makes her feel like a woman again, not by dominating her, but by refusing to be emotionally dependent on her. She begins to reattach on her own, slowly. More glances, more touches. She starts asking questions about his day. She initiates intimacy, not just out of affection, but out of need. Because the man she once felt she fully possessed has become unpredictable again, alive again. And unpredictability, when rooted in purpose, is the most seductive force on earth. In her perception, everything shifts. She no longer sees him as the nice, dependable man who faded into routine. She sees him as a sovereign being, a man with orbit, with gravity. And it haunts her in the best way. Because now she feels what she feared she had lost, the electric uncertainty that once made her ache for him. And he didn't bring it back through manipulation. He brought it back by remembering who he is. That's the final form of masculine power, to love fully, yet never lose the self. So let's consolidate this into your practical arsenal. 5 scenarios, 5 pullbacks. And in each one, the weak man collapsed, either through chasing, explaining, apologizing, or clinging. But the powerful man? He responded not with words, but with frame. Emotional gravity, stillness, controlled mystery. Every time she pulled away, he didn't fight the distance. He became the tension. He understood that her withdrawal was never the problem. His reaction was the battlefield. Here are your weapons. When she becomes distant, do not ask why. Become distant too, but with purpose. When she says she's not ready for anything serious, don't reassure her. Agree, then disappear into the richness of your life. When she ghosts after intimacy, don't chase validation. Let her ghost into the vacuum of her own confusion. When she lashes out, emotionally don't apologize or defend. Hold your frame, and let silence do the talking. When she grows cold in a long-term relationship, don't perform affection. Rekindle your mission. Let her feel the magnetic pull of your absence. These aren't mind games. They're frame games. And the only man who wins is the one who doesn't need to play, because his presence is already the game. Now we arrive at the core conclusion. The single psychological move to use the moment she pulls away, whether she's distant, distracted, or disappearing, is to invert the energy. Instead of running toward her, return to yourself. Not passively, not with bitterness, but with intent. Let your silence echo. Let your calm unnerve. Let your groundedness destabilize the narrative in her head. Because the woman who pulls away expects to become the source of power. But when she finds a man who cannot be emotionally moved, who doesn't flinch, doesn't chase, doesn't need, she begins to orbit him instead. Masculine energy is not loud. It is not persuasive. It is not performative. It is gravitational. And the man who passes the tests not by resisting them, but by welcoming them, is the man who becomes her obsession. Because in a world of men who beg, who explain, who unravel under pressure, The one who remains sovereign becomes unforgettable. This is not about indifference. It's about discipline. The discipline to resist ego validation. The discipline to feel her emotional retreat without needing to fix it. The discipline to stand in silence long enough for her to feel the full weight of your presence. This is what creates longing. This is what builds obsession. Not through force, but through mystery. You must understand this. Women don't want to lead. Even the strongest, most independent women crave the experience of a man who cannot be emotionally manipulated. Not because he's heartless, but because he's rooted. That rootedness is rare, and rare is what seduces her deepest instincts. Now, if you want to master this further, if you want to learn how to create obsession before the pullback even begins, then you need to understand how to establish frame from the very first interaction. Because prevention is power. The next video will show you the 3 subtle cues you must give in the first hour of meeting a woman that implant you in her psyche as high value. Miss those cues, and no amount of recovery will save you. Get them right, and she'll chase you for months without knowing why. Click into that now before your next interaction sabotages you. Because you don't need her back. You need her to feel the cost of losing you. That is the move. And once she feels it, she never forgets.